Darwood has come to talk to. Darwood Butcher spent 6.5 years in the British Army. He was mentioned in dispatches. He was president of our Probus Club, and he is simply inspirational to me. And I'm very proud that he's going to talk to us. He's hoping he won't get conned. He's been practicing, so over to Ralph.
Well, I don't know about all that, Jeff, but I've got 6 years to cover in 10 minutes. In case the bell surprises me, I bought my angina spray. In 1943, my father was asked to speak at the Royal Albert Hall. He took the whole family back to England, and after the event, he went back to Balfour, leaving us in boarding school, so I was in England. Sometime after war was declared, I went to Australia House and tried to join the Australian Army. I was told you could only do that in Australia. So I went off and enlisted in the British Army. And shortly afterwards, Private Butcher. And that's the photograph you really ought to see. I should still be at school when you look at that face. that Private Butcher was at Aldershot starting his training. These were the years when we were amazed to see the German army rolling through Western Europe. The days when we heard of Dunkirk and the Battle of Britain, and where we waited for the invasion. About this time, I was sent to Liverpool and the Military College of Science, and from there I emerged with a rapid promotion to Armament Artificer Staff Sergeant, and shortly afterwards sailed for Africa to start my war. We were escorted around the north of Ireland by HMS Nelson, and then sailed south around Cape Town up through the Red Sea, disembarking at Port Tewfik, which is near Suez, and going to camp near Cairo. I worked for a while in the huge base workshops at Abbasia in Cairo, and then was sent to officer training course, and from there obtained a commission, and as a young first lieutenant I made my way up the desert road to Libya, up through Hellfire Pass, or Hellfire Pass rather, we call it Hellfire, into the Libyan desert, and across the desert to El Adam, where I found my new unit. It was a heavy ACAC regiment. Like all fighting units, it had a REME attachment, 2 officers and 100 men, and a number of specialist artisans who were trained to service and repair the regiment's guns, instruments, equipment and vehicles. Heavy fighting had been going on for some time in Libya, and it wasn't long before we were ordered to retreat to the fence line at El Alamein. So down the road we went again, reaching El Alamein and thinking that only 100 miles further on was Rommel's target, the Suez Canal. From there I did a little tank recovery, and then was posted to a unit preparing to invade Sicily. The 8th Army travelled from two places, Alexander, where I was, but also some of them from Tunis, landing in the southeast corner of Sicily, and moving up the east coast. As, as soon as Syracuse was secure, a light anti-aircraft unit moved in to act as air defence, and I was appointed as OC of the Remy attachment and promoted to captain. We moved up the east coast of Sicily and the 8th Army reached Messina within 38 days, and early in September crossed Messina Straits. Later that month, about the 29th of September, I think, Italy surrendered and was out of the war. The invasion of Sicily, I understand, was the biggest invasion of that type we'd seen. The two armies were involved. They landed 160,000 men. There were some 2,500 vessels of all sizes, including 6 of Britain's biggest battleships. And preceding the shoring landing, there were over 3,000 American paratroops and 1,500 British airborne troops landed. So it was a very big invasion. We spent about 13 months in Italy, moving up as far as Rome, but a lot of our time was spent at Foggia, the large airport, ports of Italy, which the Americans British were using for bombing Germany and also German occupied areas in East Europe. Very, very quickly we were ordered back to Bari to liberate Greece, and we sailed for Piraeus, where we lost a tanker in a minefield entering Piraeus. The actual land resistance was very light, and Athens was liberated in October 44. We thought now was the time to relax, do some sightseeing, and generally enjoy ourselves, but sadly it was not to be. We started finding bodies around the streets and in various places in Athens, clearly executed, and finally that was traced to ELAS, E-L-A-S, a Greek communist partisan group who had decided to take Greece into the Russian sphere. And so the liberation force was again in action, this time fighting civilian clothed partisans. When the situation was restored, I was given 28 days leave in England, having had no home leave for 4 years, and cruised the Mediterranean, disembarking in Andes area, Glasgow. After 28 days, I sailed back to Greece, just in time to celebrate victory in Europe and the break-up of my regiment. We had a party at the Officers' Club in Athens, and I've still got a card with all their signatures. When in London, I did a bit of sightseeing down memory trails, and a V-2 rocket landed in the city, and I was staggered to, having thought the war was almost over, to realise that London was still under the hammer. A little later, I cruised the Mediterranean again, going back to England to start my demobilisation procedures. We married very quickly, Tris and I, because she wanted to come with me on the repatriation ship, and it wasn't long before we got our orders to go to Tilbury and join the Dominion Monarch. And so we sailed for Australia, stopping at the Canary Islands for refreshments, mainly champagne for big parties, and moving on to Cape Town, where we had 3 days sightseeing and across the Great Southern Ocean, arriving in Port Phillip Bay on Christmas Eve 1946 and going up to Sydney by train for Christmas Day and home. And now I think if I have time, I'm not sure, for a story or two. At least a bit of I might go on from there, having arrived back in Australia on Christmas Day, 1946. I soon had a job with BHP, February 47, at Newcastle Steelworks. One day there in 1950, a brigadier touched me on the shoulder and said he wanted to talk. And he said the Australian Army was very concerned at our northern neighbours, now over 200 million people. They were also concerned that the Australian Regular Army had been depleted by demobilisation. The Australian government had decided they should build up the citizen military forces so that there'd be a pool of partially trained soldiers that they could call on if an emergency arrived. And then he turned to me and said, would you form and develop 111 infantry workshops, citizen military forces. So I was back in uniform again for another 5 years till BHP moved me down to Melbourne. And the Australian who served in the British Army now could legitimately wear a digger's hat. And I still have it. Possibly one quick one?
Yeah.
One quick one. The Libyan desert. We think of war and bombs and bullets and screaming scuba divers, but where we lived, one of the hottest and most uncomfortable places in the world. Rain perhaps every third year. Hard sun-baked gravel and sand. No natural protection from the sun. Crawl under a truck if you need a break. And where the water wagon and hip flask is all important. Thousands of flies. Hardly a soldier escaped what we call stomach diarrhea. And of course, when the sandstorm arrived, the king, I've heard it described as severe winds from the ovens of hell, whipped the sand up into a huge mass of almost solid air, through which you couldn't see and found difficulty breathing. And the sand found every nook and cranny it could find. You had sand in your pockets, sand in your hair, sand in your ears, sand down your shirt, in your bedding, in your equipment. And anything you could find, including your weaponry, was sand. And this would go on for possibly 2 or 3 hours, or possibly 2 or 3 days. And when it ended, well, just before that, your face was usually covered in sweat, and the wind would swipe the sand into your face, leaving you with a mask through which you gaze in small eye holes. And your skin was irritated and painful at times. And when it was over, in a few hours or a few days, there were no showers, there were no baths, and you might risk a few precious drops of water to swill your mouth out and clean your eyes and hope. And I'll leave you now to enjoy your cup of tea.
Vice President, I endeavoured to get Ralph to come along and talk, and he very much work, but events passed us by. But he's had a tremendous life, and 97 got out. I hope in 10 years I've got the bounce that you have in your steps. So thank you very much for sharing.